Thank you so much. Hey, welcome everyone. And welcome to a very exciting industry and area that's going to grow. I don't have any great slides like everyone else. I just got a whole bunch of stories. And normally those stories tend to lead to some sort of insight. I hope they do. But they're just sort of practical in the trenches stories. So I in 2020, about January, I was skiing and I lost the feeling in my left arm. And I was like, that's a bit unusual. So I went to the doctor and I thought I was going to have a stroke, like it happens. So I was facing that sort of, situation. And the doctor, I went through all the tests, went through an MRI and all this stuff. And I realized there was nothing wrong with me. I literally did every single test. And I was the one who was asking for the test and I was convinced there was something wrong. But in March of 2020, obviously, this was a tough time in the world. We were launching the Finder app. And the Finder app was really an entire disruption of the Finder business because for the first time, we started sending messages to members and suggesting things they can compare as opposed to them, going onto Google or finding us and going and comparing something and actually going and taking that action, right? So it's a flipping of the model. So today, what I want to talk about is about innovation and disruption. And I sort of thought about this a lot in the space you guys are in right now. And I think there are some key takeaways. I want to talk about taking big bets. I want to talk about making great products and really about this innovation disruption. So I just want to confess something which is pretty important. Is I actually, when Finder started, I used to build websites, so people actually coded them in my college room. So my mastery was about coding, and then I learned how to do SEO because that was something which my clients wanted. They wanted to just get to the top of Google. That was this thing. This is 2000, right? 2001, 2002. And back then it was, quite unusual to do that kind of stuff. And then in 2006, I said, well, all these people are making so much money, why don't I have a go at it? So we started building websites. And this is the actual story, founding story of Finder that I don't think everyone knows, is that there were 12 pieces of paper we'd put out of ideas, literally A4 pages with about one sentence. And we mixed them around and we picked out 5 ideas. And we went, right, let's launch all of them. So one was a Mother's Day present site, one was a Sudoku site, one was a poker site, one was just so happened to be credit card finder. And a bunch of others. There was an Anzac Day website that didn't go terribly well. So the Sudoku site failed because you can't make money. Mother's Day present only happens one time a year. Oh, we had christmasday.com.au. That failed. There's only Christmas. So anyway, found that out the hard way. So I wouldn't say necessarily as an entrepreneur, I'm like incredibly strategic in that sense. I'm just really good at coming up with lots of ideas and executing them quickly in a small scale way. And what I want you to take from that, but is I see innovation in that same vein. I see whenever you've got a new industry or a new problem, innovation is not like, oh, design, I know exactly where I'm going to go. It's more like I've got a blindfold on and somewhere around here is the gold mine. And you're sort of wandering in your technology roadmap, trying to find clients and product market fit, and you're not sure, is it over here? There's a dragon down there. Okay, watch out for that. So I just want to share that feeling, and so everyone can like connect on that together. And what I want other people to do on the other side is the people who are buying tech from you. You've got to empathize with the other guys on the other side because they're wandering around in the dark trying to help you. They're trying to serve you. They're the ones that are literally trying to innovate and grow and build something. And you know what? They've got funding and they're putting their own skin on the line. It is hardcore. There is hardcore risk going on. And on the other side, you're looking at it going, the client's going, whoa, it's a pretty risky company. It's a pretty risky bet. I don't know if that's going to work. Is this going to fail? Is it going to, is this secure? No one's ever done it before. So there are pioneers on both sides. There's pioneers on the tech side and the innovators, and there's pioneers on the client side. And if you go back in time, 2006, when I was literally coding Finder, and I was calling up clients, and I was literally writing content on the website, and trying to get banks onto the site, there's this 20-year-old kid calling up St. George Bank or whoever, and saying, hey, do you want to list your credit cards on my website? That's like someone had to take a bet. Someone had to take a chance on the other side. And if you're on that other side and you take that bet, you get the win. Or you can take a loss. So both sides are innovating. I think it's important to recognize that, and it's important. I'm going to tell a story about this if I can as well. But that's back in the day. The only thing I would suggest, unfortunately, fortunately, I don't think necessarily Finder was an innovation. I can't claim to be an innovator back then. In the beginning, there were other comparison sites, long before Finder. 2006 wasn't early in comparison. 1999 was early. Really, really early days. And there were people who were back then doing that stuff. But what I want to talk about is sort of 4 different components. I want to break them down, and then I'm going to tell a story, and then I'm going to wrap up, and then I'm going to open for some questions. So I want to talk about the difference between innovation and incremental improvement. So there are 2 things going on. Innovation, I believe, is when you take giant leaps forward, where you're wandering around in the dark and suddenly you strike upon this new thing. Let's talk about examples of that. One of my most favorite example is Edwin Land in 1947, 21st of February 1947, stood in his office in Cambridge, a tiny little office with the New York Times and the Washington Post, and he took a photo of himself with his contraption and instantly revealed a photo of himself. 1947, just take that in for a minute. That's very close to the end of World War II. There's a depression going on. It was a miracle. Mr. Eastman of Kodak patented the film in 1888, and there was no innovation in film since then. Until 1947, when this guy just randomly takes a photo of himself and goes, hey, check this out. Here's a selfie. And there's a photo, if you can Google it, Edwin Land, and have a look at it after this. You'll see him. It's this really disturbing photo of himself staring at himself. And there's only a couple of other black and white photos on the time, right? And that to me that is an innovation. That is literally leaping out into the future and saying, hey, I've got a brand new thing, check this out. He only made 56 at the time. Literally people were clambering over themselves to try and get it. And then obviously the Polaroid company. The Polaroid company was a crushing company. Still is somewhat bumbling along. But back then, it was an unbelievable business. And a disruptor of this time. Now let's talk about incremental improvement. Incremental improvement are, when you've got something and you've got it working and you take a little leap forward. It's like, oh, I can see a little improvement. Like, for example, let's take the Walkman, the Sony Walkman. You remember it started out in a certain format, and over time it got slimmer and tighter and better, and the headphones fit a little bit easier. I wonder who copied that, right? So Apple literally, Steve Jobs loved Sony, loved Sony. He had Sony merchandise all throughout his office. Loved it. And what did the iPod first do? It was really big, and it got smaller and littler, and now you've got the iPod, right? That's incremental improvement. It's not the disruptive innovation. So 2 different things. Let's talk about disruption. When it comes to disruption, I'll just take a quick drink, I apologize. There's a couple of bugs going around. I don't know if anyone's caught one before. So let's talk about disruption. Disruption, I believe, there are 2 types. One is where you take something, an industry, and you create something and you sit in counter position to what is out there already. What does that mean? It means that you have a new model, a new way of doing things. So let's go back to Mr. Eastman and Kodak. Remember you used to take the photo, you'd send off these pieces of film, and you'd wait for a few days, and then you'll get your photos back. Now, let's talk about the counter position. Hey, and this is Edwin Land, by the way. He was walking outside with his 3-year-old daughter, going up the hill. They took a photo together. She said, hey, can I just see the photo now? Why do I have to wait? And he went on to explain scientifically exactly why. And then he realized, why can't I have it now? And that was the beginning of the Polaroid camera. That is an example to me of a counterposition. One is instant, the other one is I'm waiting 2 or 3 days. Then there's the other one, the final one, which is the disruptive innovation, which is actually not great, where it actually fizzles or it actually causes more problems than it does good things. And there's a lot of those other examples that I'm going to talk about. One example, and I'll be, again, damaging admission, was back in 2015, I actually was going through a divorce. And by the way, my ex-wife is an amazing person. We go traveling together. I know modern families. Love her, she's amazing. But we were having went through a tough time. And slowly over time, I realized I'd given all of my roles in Finder to other people. That was my goal, but I think when you start a company and you're a founder, your job is to go and create jobs and hand off all your hats of responsibility to other people. That's your job. And other things as well, but that's one of mine. And what I realized is eventually I had no one that was reporting to me. I would turn up to meetings and I realized there's no one in my team anymore. So I realized what happens then when people get bored. This is a terrible thing, by the way, and you'll notice this in your life. If you get bored, you either do 2 things. One, you either get really destructive and you break something, so you have a problem and someone you can go and fix. Yay. Or you go and get really creative. Unfortunately, at the start, I got really disruptive and I became the problem. So I realized I needed to basically take myself out of the company. And that's a really, really tough thing to do with something that you create. But sometimes a necessary thing. And the self-awareness of that is pretty hard to take in. So I removed myself and I sent myself to America to go and start Finder in America, where no one had heard of us, and it was a brand new opportunity, and I was perfect for that situation. And I think if I was to pick up on the earlier talk, if I can, talking about those 2 different types of leaders. Inside Finder, I can clearly see that. There are leaders which are great at creating this vision, aligning people, and taking them to a place. And then there are, I believe, the other type, which are the disruptive people, where they just have a blank canvas, a good blindfold, and a kind of an instinctive sense of where to go and potentially where things and dragons were or could be, maybe, and gold mines might be, could be, might not be, tend to not be, but sometimes are. Yes. Just by chance, 12 pieces of paper and just 5 of those and 1, etc., etc. Repeated over and over again, done with enough intuition and slowly over time, that I feel is more like myself. And so today I don't necessarily run Finder, but I do lead and drive its innovation, and I create new things all the time, and I get busy and I get super creative because I get bored really quick. I hope everyone's not bored yet. Now let me tell you a story now about innovation. I'm going to tell you the story of the disruptor, the disrupted, and the innovation. So I'm going to go back in time when Apple was crushing it with the Apple II. The Apple II was a crushing product. It was literally just flying off the shelves. And then what happened, actually, is that IBM came and disrupted Apple. Apple released the Apple III. The Apple III was quite an intense product because what happened was Steve hated fans because fans were noisy. And so he removed all the fans, and so the chips would overheat, and some of them would sometimes pop off a little bit. And so the tech support were told that if the computer didn't work, you'd have to lift the computer up slightly 2 inches off the table and drop it. That's literally the tech support answer. The product cost $7,800 back then. That's a lot of money, probably 24 grand today. IBM released a machine that cost $1,565. And they blitzed the market. They had an open architecture. Many people were able to build products. After the 30-day design, they rolled out a computer in 1 year. Apple took 3 years to roll its machines out. It just literally disrupted Apple. And you remember, Apple went down almost to $1 in share price. I think slightly under. One of the companies at the time of when this happened, right? So Apple's the one getting disrupted, IBM being the disruptor. There was another company innovating. Mr. Graham Moore, I don't know if anyone knows Mr. Graham Moore, in the technologist here might. There's Moore's Law, where every year the computer gets a little smaller and faster. I don't know the exact law, but he was one of the founders of Intel. Forgive me on my Moore's Law representation. I'm sure someone has a better idea, but it's something like that. Mr. Moore, at the time, realized, see, Intel used to make memory chips for mainframes, big computers, right? And remember, not everyone had a desktop computer on their table. Big computers, they made mainframes, like memory for them. And the Japanese companies were smashing Intel, like crushing them, making them more efficient, cheaper, faster, more compact. They were just crushing them. And then IBM said to Intel, hey, you know, we've got this new open architecture. Do you want to make it like a microprocessor? And they were like, well, there was one guy called Ted Hoff who actually bought back, Intel actually made a microprocessor for a calculator back then. The calculator was the precursor to the computer, if you think about it. And actually one of the reasons, this is an important historic note, is that Sony actually made a calculator, but they stopped. And I believe that's why Sony never mastered computing. Sony computers never quite took off. Their phones never quite made it. They've never quite been able to make software. And that's why you remember Sony crushed it in the 80s and then other companies came and took their mantle. So I just want to note that moment, that choice, right? That's an important moment in time. For all you innovators making decisions right now about where you want to go and what the future might be, big bets like that, like the calculator, can turn into big things. So Intel made the processor for the calculator, and it was bought back by this company called Busicom. They bought it back. Ted Hoff went, hey, we better buy that thing back because IBM wants a processor. Let's buy that thing back. So they bought it back, not for calculators. You couldn't use it for calculators. They went, for this computer thing. All right, no worries. Yeah, no worries. You can have it back. Cool, cool, cool. That microprocessor division, obviously, over the next 10 years, drove the growth of Intel. They stopped making RAM. They started making microprocessors. They innovated, and they kept innovating. And then in the 90s, when Mr. Graham Moore stepped down, Andy Grove took over. And Mr. Andy Grove said, hey, you know what? We're going to brand this and we'll put an Intel inside. And you remember the 1990s, it just crushed the market. So that's the story of the disrupted, the disruptor, and the innovator. Obviously, there was a big pivot by Intel there as well. I don't know how I'm going for time because I'm terrible with time. 5 minute questions or?
5 minutes plus questions.
5 minutes plus questions. There we go. I want to talk, if I can, but after that, for the last few minutes, and I want to talk about a little bit about this industry that you guys find yourselves in right now, and if I can. And maybe I don't know everything about it, all the dynamics, but it reminds me a lot of the internet starting up, right? You don't have any standards. There's no WordPress. There's no jQuery. You know, these are big, important standards that change things. These things will come. These things will happen. And I think what's interesting and what's important right now is, I call back to that feeling, is that I felt the exact same way when I was building websites. I had no idea that this particular site or this comparison site would ever turn into anything. And it's okay to feel that way. That ambiguity is fine. I think what's important, and if you can, as best you can, this is going to sound very uncomfortable, but if you've been in this industry long enough, there's a I know a saying that's been said many times, but I just want to call on it if I can, is I don't think you can actually ask your customers today what they want. You're going to have to just go and build it. So when Edward Land was making the Polaroid camera, he didn't go and ask everyone what do they want with a better camera. He put the instant camera out there and asked everyone to buy it. The only way you're going to know if people want to buy it is if someone is going to actually put some money up. Now let me share you a way in which there's a secret bot that no one quite knows. And Sony did the same thing with the Walkman, right? The Walkman was shot down. It was like, who wants to put something in their ears and walk around so no one, but only you can hear but no one else can? Remember people walking around with stereos on their shoulder, you know, what's up? Check my music out. I want to share, this is a secret which not many people know, is that both Sony and hired and Polaroid both hired critics, deep experts. One, in Edward Land's case, in the area of photography, one of the greatest photographers. They would give him the camera and he would write reports, pages and pages of critique about the product. This is wrong, the button's in the wrong place, that doesn't come out, it sticks, la la la, can't you guys make a camera, you know? Oh, no. But a deep expert in the field of photography. Sony did the same thing. There was a guy who was a deep expert in sound, and he would write pages and pages and pages of critique about all the products. Just by history, if everyone knows, the word Sony actually comes from the word sonus, which means sound. That's where the name comes from, and a mixture of Sonny Boy combined together to make Sony. So sound's always been very, very important. And Akio Morita, one of the founders, he used to listen to records. His father used to bring home high-quality records, and he used to listen to them over and over and over again. So sound's always been a big deal. And this critique inside Sony wrote pages and pages about the product and the problems about it, right? That actual person they hired and eventually went on to run Sony. So who's your critic? Who's your expert that's giving you feedback? Who's the person that's telling you exactly what we do need and what we don't need? Who's the person who's telling you where the bumps are and what the problems are? You need that person on your payroll giving you the answers. That criticism you're going to get thick and fast, but it's very hard to determine what the noise is and what the signal. You need an expert on your team. A doctor or a specialist or a deep, passionate person about your particular product or industry that you are competing in. Bring them onto your team. You want to hear that all day. I could talk about more things, but I'm just super conscious of time. So what I might do is end here, and I think if I can finish, is obviously I think that it's really important and really valuable what you guys are doing in terms of this industry, and I believe in it, and I believe in each other. And I just wanted to remind everyone again, there are two sides to this equation, and both sides need to take bets. So if you're on the client side, take a bet on someone, because you know they might build a great product. And if you're on the tech side, find that critique and keep on building until someone does believe in you as well. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Fred. Thanks so much, Fred. Do we have any quick questions for Fred? That was all. Yep.
Fred, Lachlan McDonald.
Bit louder.
Lachlan McDonald is my name. Awesome presentation, really interesting. I could personally listen to you for hours. What do you read? What does your brain take in daily? Where do you get all your info from?
So just to share the question, if I can repeat, Lachlan, is firstly, you can listen to me for hours, and I appreciate that, but I don't think everyone else has much more important things to listen to me. So just want to share, I actually value you guys taking the time to listen to me, so that's deeply appreciative. Thank you. I think the question is, how do I, where do I get my sources of information, or what do I read, what do I consume? So I have a theory, and that is, there's two theories combined together. One, every idea is a remix of a previous idea that's been created. And if you go to Google, I don't know if it still exists, or YouTube, type in "everything is a remix," and just watch, I think there's 2 videos And if you just watch those videos, you'll notice that literally things are just constantly copying and slightly changing and slightly repeating all throughout time. So, you know, when you talk about innovation and disruption, that's a core principle of mine that I believe. And therefore, because of that, it leads to my second point, which is I believe every great entrepreneur, every great innovator had someone they admired and taught them a few things and principles and ideas and situations that they believed in that helped them get to where they are. So let's go back in time. Steve Jobs loved Edwin Land. Edward Land loved Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison probably loved Benjamin Franklin. And each of these people probably gave ideas and were remixes of the previous past. And so right now what I'm doing, it sounds unusual, is I'm going back and digging up literally autobiographies. I listened to one about Henry Ford. Henry Ford, by the way, is an unbelievable pioneer. Way more innovative than just making the Ford motor car. And obviously, you know, he said, famous, you know, everyone says, you know, if you ask him what he could make, let's say a faster horse. Well, I don't know if he actually said that, by the way, but if you know Henry Ford, that's what he thought. He was like, I believe this is what's going to happen. People were telling him, no, I'm doing this. Every car's black. But Henry, there are other cars out there that people might want in other colors and stuff like, nope, black it is. Okay, we make black. Just to give you the conviction level as well of Henry Ford, when he founded his company, only owned 20% of it. And he slowly over time bought out all the other shareholders. Henry Ford's true idea, by the way, I'm getting slightly off topic, but I just thought it could be interesting as well to listen to. Sorry, I apologize. But just to inspire you, I want you to feel inspired about creating something new and great, right? This is the new industry of Australia, and I believe in it. Henry Ford had one idea. His one idea was he wanted to build a car for the everyday man. That's actually his innovation. Right, the normal motor car back then cost about $6,000. Most people made $2 a day. Just that mathematics. No one had a car. And so because no one had a car, you know, I live on a farm or live outside of town, I don't go to town. I go to town maybe every month because I got to ride a horse. It's like, oh man, 2-3 hours a day, half a day. And then I got to ride all the way back. It's like, whoa, geez, what's all that about, you know? Now, it's like you live 10, 15, 20, 30 kilometers away, you just get in your car, drive there, and then I do this. People do this every day. People catch airplanes every day, right? That's the level. Henry Ford changed the shape of the planet. All these roads, all of these connections, that's the level. His one idea was the everyday man car. He brought the car down to $600. That's his innovation. And the way he did it was he was a mechanic by trade. Is he took the car and he unpacked every single piece of it from top to bottom, millions and millions of decisions to make it lighter, cheaper, but still high quality. So for example, there was a piece of wood in the car. He looked at that piece of wood and said, you know what, that wood, it's got 20 pounds of water in it. Too heavy. So he replaced the piece of wood. And slowly over time, the car became cheaper and cheaper, and it became the everyday man's car. I think that story is inspirational. I think that story is insightful. And I think there are little gems, and at certain times in your life and certain times in your journey when you lose the will to keep going, the will to keep pushing because your product, you haven't found the product market fit, you're still searching, you're still grinding it out. And what I try to do is I read and listen to heroes that I consider. There are unfortunately a lot of them dead. You know, I haven't met too many of my heroes. I met people who have met them, so people who have met Steve Jobs, people who have worked with Steve Jobs, people who have, you know, worked with Jeff Bezos, or like gotten close to these people. Like it's very hard to connect to Henry Ford or Edwin Land. Edwin Land, great guy. But you know, books are unfortunately in our TikTok sort of crazy levels of attention are tough to consume, but extremely highly valuable. And so I buy these old books and I read them. I know it's boring, but but there are great stories of what I need, and not necessarily what other people are consuming.
Thank you. Any other questions? I've got one, Fred. When you realised that you were that you were being disruptive, what was that moment like for you? And how did it? And what was the kind of moment where you thought, actually, this can't continue?
Yeah, so I think this is a cycle throughout my life, and it took me a long time, probably in my late 30s, that I realised when I'm starting to become like this. And I think every founder will feel this as well. It's I liken it to, has anyone seen ScoobyDoo?
Thank you, sorry.
So let's go through the classic story of ScoobyDoo, right? So they found this house, it's being knocked down for construction, but for some reason the construction people keep getting, disturbed by this ghost. This ghost keeps scaring them, it's wandering around all the time. And eventually ScoobyDoo goes along, they unpick it, and they find out that it's not a ghost, it's actually the original builder of the house that doesn't want to get destroyed. So I was the ghost in the house, trying to keep the house how it was. The soul of the company, the energy of it, and any little thing triggered me. It's like, that's not how we did it, that's not why we did that. Why are we doing it like that now? So when you start, and then not everything's going to go your way, everything's going to change, but hopefully, just hopefully, if you can document enough, put enough into values, right, principles inside your company, these are things which I try to do to try to keep the energy going. And there are certain rituals inside the company that you need to enhance and keep that soul going. As a founder, you're the soul, you're the protector of the soul of the company. That's a lot of your role. And then eventually, it gets taken over, and hopefully, over time, it keeps going. But, I had enough, I just was extremely disruptive. I was always having a fight with someone, but really what was so bizarre is that, I want to take responsibility for this, but why do you want to take responsibility, Fred? I mean, you can do nothing and everything will still happen and get done? What are you doing, man? That's like a really bizarre concept. So really it's an ego thing to some extent, but on the other side, there's just a moment in time when you need to let go. That was your chance. Like a child, really, You're an archer, you get to pull back the thing, you shoot the arrow off, and then, ooh. I think that's what a company is a lot like.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking Fred Schebesta. Thank you so much, Fred.